And Wayne, you want to introduce Weldon?
This is a program I've looked forward to. Weldon Fields, W4HAT from Greensboro, is our oldest member in terms of age. He is still very active. He is the most gracious gentleman, one of those most gracious gentleman I've ever met. He never forgets a name or a call, and he is always a pleasure to talk to. And his hamming goes back. I'll let him tell you, but it goes back a ways. And we originally started looking at this program as history of the chapter from the very early days. And we had a couple of people that we contacted, and Weldon said he didn't know if he could talk that much about the early days of the chapter. What about radio before World War II, which would bring back some memories for a couple of people and would be a real eye-opening experience for the rest of us. So I am terrifically proud to introduce Weldon Fields, and he will have a program that I'm sure all of us will enjoy.
Well, thank you, Wayne. You might have stretched a few points there a little bit, but if I sit down after a while, don't worry about it. Can last for a while. And as long as you know, any of y'all listen to me on any of the bands, well, you know that I can run my mouth pretty good. Saying nothing, I guess. But you know, we're celebrating. Let me start off with, we're celebrating. How many know how old QCWA is?
Tell us, Weldon. QCWA National?
Yeah.
Is that 47?
That's right. We're 65 years old. And how many knows how old chapter 126 is?
80 or 81. I mean, year.
Yeah.
What year did we start?
Well, 1980. 32 years. We're 32 years old and 2 days. It was in March of 32 years ago, the 15th, that this chapter was formed. I can't remember. I remember the eating place, and I knew it was over there somewhere in the neighborhood of Concord, Kannapolis, or somewhere. And I ran into a Quacker, and I'll mention that in a minute, and I found out the name of that place, and it was Hobo Junction is where it was formed in March of 1980. Yeah, 1980, that's right. Well, it all began in 1929, and I had a physics teacher in school that decided that he wanted to turn his physics class, or give those that were members of his class, an opportunity to learn something about radio. So with about half of his class, or about 25, decided they'd like to learn something about radio. And so first of all, he started a class teaching us CW. And one little sidelight on learning the CW. Me and my buddy, W4HAT, whenever we go, we all had classes, he and I had classes in about the same room every day. And we had a kind of a thing that we wanted to be sure we could see each other when we went to class, because we would sit there and practice codes, from across the room with dot, dot, get dot. And that's the way we got to learn our code. And that's the reason that I probably ended up having to go an extra semester in high school. But that physics teacher, Stanley Jappo Johnson, I don't guess it's anybody, he was a great baseball coach for Greensboro High School, and he was also the physics teacher. He was also a ham, W4 Zulu, W4ZH. And incidentally, anybody knows anything about Greensboro, where the Friendly Shopping Center is now, over on the west side of Greensboro, right in the middle, and that's where his house used to be. And he also had a 40-meter rotatable 2-element antenna that was there until the very last minute whenever they had to finally tear his house down. And that's where the the Friendly Avenue Shopping Center is, too, like where his house used to sit. But he kind of was real interested in the ham radio, to the fact that after we learned the code, and we had a couple of tubes we had, and I had a 210. Anybody know what a 210 was? Well, anyhow, it's a triode, and I had a 210 that I made a transmitter out of, a tune play, tune grid transmitter. About it. Don't anybody know what a tune play, tune grid transmitter is? Well, I did. I did, and I had a 201A that was about that high, and I made a 1-tube receiver out of that. And anybody know what a telephone battery is?
Yep.
A 1-volt battery, about that, a 1.5-volt battery, about that high, about the size of 2 glasses. No, not even two glasses high. But that furnished the filament. And anybody know what a 45-volt B battery is? Well, back in those days we didn't have power supplies, so we had batteries. And it happened that I worked at W.T. Granson as a floor walker, and that store had supposedly a radio parts department in its hardware department. And we had batteries, and we had condensers, and we had 3-circuit tuners. Anybody know what a 3-circuit tuner is? Well, I'll tell you what, it's another coil about the size of this glass, and inside you had another little coil that you could rotate inside of that coil from the outside with a knob out here. Well, you know, we found out that if me and my buddy A.J. Grease from AGD I mentioned, we found out that if you put that receiver into a position where it started oscillating, and it would make a noise, it'd make a carrier. Well, we got messed around in the physics department and found out if you take a carbon microphone, something like a 3AG American I used to sell, and if you put a 1.5-volt battery in series with the microphone and you spoke into it, well, then you could hear it made a noise. It transposed your voice. So you wrap a couple of coils around that outside coil of that 3-circuit tuner, and you turn it over to where it went into oscillation, and you sit there and talk in that microphone, and you have a transmitter. Well, we didn't have any more sense, me and A.W. He lived on one side of Greensboro, and I lived on the other side. So my first contact in the broadcast band was from one 3-circuit tuner to another 3-circuit tuner 5 miles away. So that's the reason I said I wanted to wait and tell you what my first contact was as far as, of course, that wasn't a licensed amateur radio contact. That was a bootlegging contact. You think I can get away with it this day and time? Well, and the FCC won't do anything about it. Anyhow, that's where it all started. And in the spring of in the fall of 1930, we studied in that physics class a little bit more about what a circuit was with a tube in it, and a little bit more about the theory of how it operated. And so in the spring of 1930, me and W4AGD got in on a 4-cylinder inline Henderson bike. Anybody know anything about them? There are not many of them left around this day and time. And we went to Washington to see his cousin. And we were messing around in Washington one day, and he said, well, let's go by FCC and take the exam, see if we can pass it. So we did, and dadgummit, I failed the code. And of course, he outdid me by about a few days, and the reason is when we got back, you remember FCC used to have, I can't think of his name now, but he went all over this part of the country, and he would put on, give you a chance to take the exam. Yeah, it was a sort of, I don't know how many times a year he did it, but he did it. So we come back in 1st June, a latter part of May from up there, and in the first weekend in June, that guy was over there in Winston-Salem at Reynolds High School giving the exam. And that's when I passed mine, in June 1930. That's been a couple of years ago. And ever since, I've been a ham all these years, and I've been an active ham to a great extent, except, I got married in 1936. And for about 6 months, I was off there. And I don't know why, but I couldn't find time to get on the air, and bless Mickey's heart. And about in 1941, she said, well, I can't beat them, so I'll join them. And so I took her up to Washington, Richmond, and she passed her exam over there, and she was a ham too. And incidentally, my daughter inherited, or she has her call, and my grandson is a ham. I just talked to him. He's on a walking camping trip, and he was up in the URM Mountains. I talked to him last night, and my son-in-law, Bill Tippett, W4 Zulu Victor, if you operate on 160 meters, well, you know him, he's top dog. Well, I got a pretty good sized ham family, and we all enjoy hamming, except my daughter-in-law was a little slow by getting around. But anyhow, that's the way I got started in ham radio, and all up through the years. One of the main, in the back of my mind from the very beginning, anybody want to tell me, I'll give you another little quiz, anybody want to tell me what the line in FCC's, what's the number of that book, anyhow, the book that's got our rules and regulations in it, what the first line it is under the amateur radio operators portion of it, what it said. What's the name of that book I'm trying to think of somewhat? Anyhow.
Part 97.
Yeah, the what?
Part 97.
Yeah, part 97. And, yeah, 97, 95, whichever it is. And what it says about amateur in the very first paragraph I read. And why that you
It's a service, emergency communication.
Right. And all my life, I've always been interested in the fact that we as amateurs have the greatest opportunity that I know of any other group, whether or as great, to serve our fellow man, is to be ready to go to work in the case of emergencies and give them their emergency communication. So that's where it started. And all this time I have taken a part in the ham emergency communication. Well, some of the other things that's happened down there, I won't go in all the details about the radio clubs that we started, but we started. Well, we got 2 in Greensboro now, and we are quite. In fact, today, incidentally, when you get back home, look around on any of the band and find N4G, because up there today in the Guilford County Courthouse Battleground, they've got a special event station on the air right now. N4G, it'll be on today and tomorrow, and it celebrates whatever 100th birthday of the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. And if you like to contact a special event station, well, then that's the place to go and find it. In fact, I worked them this morning before I left the house on 15 across town. Well, on that in that day of March in 1980, when this chapter was formed, I look at the list. Y'all know, remember Quacker? I've still got a stack of them that W4UH, Uncle Henry, used to put out every month of the Quackers. And in my copy of, I haven't got them all, but this one's dated 2000. That's whenever he said we should have a 20th anniversary. Well, actually, we're having a 32nd one. But in that, he listed some of the people that were there. And whenever we formed the very first meeting that this chapter had. I wonder if any of you remember these. Let me call out some of the ones that were there. You might remember Buck Hannon from Charlotte. Anybody else remember him? Of course, most of these are all South Keys at this time. But the Buck Hannon, W4 DSU was there. If I can read, his secretary-treasurer was Val Valentine, and he hasn't been a Solid Key too long. Y'all remember him? He was the secretary. Director Lim Holland, and he was a dear friend of mine from Solid City. I've been knowing him. Yeah. Do you remember him?
He's my dad's first cousin, so indirectly he's how I'm.
Right. Yeah. Well, he was a good customer of mine when I was in the radio part business too,
We
and a
all
great
like him.
friend. I used to stop by and see him all the time. He was one of the original signers of the what do they call it? Something whenever you presented to become a chapter, and let's see who else. Furman James, anybody remember him? Who he was? Lived over there. Furman James. He was one of the members of the signing of the first one, and I can't remember any more offhand. These are down here in black and white, and I can look at that and read it. But it was actually about 11 that day whenever we signed it up to become Chapter 126. And that was the beginning of what you see is here today, and what a great crowd of people it's been to be a member and to be a group of it. And I got a lot of things that happened back over my life. Well, let me tell you about, are y'all old enough to remember Hazel in '54? When Hazel come through? Well, the Greensboro Radio Club, I was in the radio parts business then, just before then, and I had all source access, and I had more surplus junk and leftover surplus from the services. And so us hams took that junk that I had, and out at the radio club, which was just this side of the airport, in an FAA building, and I had plenty of 304 TLs. You remember? You all know what they are now. 3500 three is about the same thing. And we made an amplifier that was about the size of this table, and we made a modulator, an EM modulator about the size of that table, and the transformer that fed that thing was just about the size of that table and weighed about 500 pounds, it seemed to me like. So we made that push-pull final, and we took the modulator and upstairs in the attic, and we ran, of course, 220 up there to it. And y'all know what a motor starter switch is, contactor is, about so big. And that's what we used to turn it on with. But, you know, you got a little start and stop button. And we were sure that we used that to turn it off and on with, too. And when you did, the people in North Carolina knew that when we turned it on, we turned it off. But anyhow, I was getting to Hazel one day at lunch, well, on Friday at lunch, in that October. My boss said, "Well, I wonder what's going on with the hurricane that's down on the coast." I said, "I don't know. Let's go out to Radio Club and see what we can find out." So we went out there and I turned that thing on, and lo and behold, they were needing somebody to be a net controller, and then somebody that had a signal, and I sure you had one. So I sat there from that day, that Friday at lunch, until that Sunday night when I finally got to go home. And on Saturday, the SCM of North Carolina lived in Winston, and I can't remember his name either. You'll have to forgive me, I'm having to remember names and calls. But we had a telephone in the radio cut out there, and he picked up the telephone and called and said, look, it'd be pretty nice if you'd identify every once in a while who you are and who's transmitting and making all these transmissions. So he didn't give me a ticket, but he sure let me know that I was breaking the rules a little bit. And then we sat there. And at the same time, anybody remember W4LCV? He was one of the greatest operators, CW operators we ever had, and he lived down just outside of Elizabeth City. And he was a great ham operator, and he was the first one that I ever heard put a single side band signal on the air, and it happened during Hazel. And I couldn't understand what he was saying on single side band and me on AM, but you know what I found out? And y'all, I'm sure y'all probably know it now. All I had to do was put it in the CW position and have a beat frequency, a variable oscillator, and I could sit there and copy single side bands. You know you could do that? You can sure do it. And that's where it started. Well, that kind of taught us something, of course. And then I traveled down here in Eastern North Carolina and tried to make a living for a few years. And I went by to see Brother Parker. Anybody remember Al Parker? And here's a picture of Al Parker. He lived in Euban. And he also had an S10 single-side band generator upstairs in his place down there on the banks of the Trent River. And that was the second place I ever saw a single-side band transmitter, and before I got one. But he is the originator of the Coastal Carolina Emergency Net. He used to have a net on every Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Why he'd call it, I don't think he had a name then, but he called the crowd together and they had a net. Well, after Hazel, he decided it was time for him to form a net, and that is the beginning of the Coastal Carolina Emergency Net, which is still in operation. And they'll tell you from the beginning, this date and time, they're not an emergency net as such. But when there is an emergency, they are willing and want to handle health and welfare traffic. I'll have to admit this too. One meeting they had here, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, and we got people that are in that net all the way from New York to Florida. I said, let's change it to the East Coast emergency net, but the old codgers didn't want to change it with me. Bob, I couldn't get them to change it, and there's no reason to change it. It's still the Coastal Carolina Emergency Net. And of course, the Tar Heel Emergency Net is a part of the emergency system, and it's tied in with. Oh, here's something I wanted to say. I forget. I knew I'd forget actually. I picked up this. This is a kind of log book I used to sell when I was on radio, but it's for mobile logs. So you can just stick that in, and stick it in your glove part. And I happened to pick this up out of some of my junk, and it's the oldest one I could find, and it's only back to 1972, I believe. But there's one little old note right there that says, March the 11th, QCWA. Does anybody know what I meant when I wrote that down there for anything back in 1972? But I tried to figure out, well, what in the world does he mean by that? Did I mean by that? But there's nothing else in there to tell me what that meant back in those days. That's just a brief note of what has gone on in my life. And this day and time, I'm still running my mouth on 75 meters and all over the band from one end to the other. Wayne's got me beat a little bit on. How many in here are going for the Diamond Jubilee, ARLDXCC? Probably. There's one. I know Wayne's done it. Anybody else? Yeah, Bob. You know what I mean? Y'all you paying attention to what's going on about that? But what it is, this year is the 75th anniversary of the DXCC. And so for that reason, they've got a program on this year, goes all the way through the year till next December. And if you work 100 stations and send them in that whole year now, how easy it would be, and send them in, you get a certificate, DXCC certificate of some sort. I don't know what it looks like yet, I don't know whether we'll able to say. But that's another challenge to you whenever you're sitting around haven't got anything else to do, is turn your receivers on. Like I worked 110 and I thought they were all good, and I gave it to my daughter to type up. She said, well, there's a lot of these I can't find on the DXCC road anyhow. But that was just a sign, because now, I've got one more thing and I'll hush up. Y'all know who Fessenden is?
Yeah.
How many has ever paid any attention to Fessenden and know what he does? Well, do you know that there's some property down on Roanoke Island and down at Buxton that has been set aside? Part I don't know whether it's still at Manio, it's still down there at Buxton. In his name, you might say, in his honor. But that man had more patents than anybody else when it comes to amateur radio. But the thing I haven't been able to figure out, and I've always been interested in it, is why people have not given him credit that he is due, and all of the experiments and all the things that he had. He's the first one to make the contact by radio well across the pond. He broadcast in 01, either 01 or 02, across the pond. And then all of the experiments he made from Manio down to Buxton. And here, how many of you know Everett, who is it?
Mike Everett.
Yeah, Mike Everett, over at Raleigh. He wrote up this, and I've got a few here for somebody if you're interested. He wrote up a thesis on it, and this will tell you all about him. And it kind of, if it don't give you an urge to give him credit for what he did, that's what I would do. And well, I kind of had in the back of my mind now that Phil Wicker, ACY, was on the board of trustees or whatever for the Fessenden story, but he's from that silent key, and nobody else that I know of has ever picked up. Now, Mike Everett, like I say, has written it, but he wrote the thesis, so there's never been anything else done. So anybody'd like to have one of these folders and read about it. What I was saying in the back of my mind, if we wanted a project as a chapter, that it might be that we could take on the project of doing whatever we could to be sure that he is given the credit that he's never been given the credit. He had more patents concerning communication than Marconi had. And some of them were snuck away from Fessenden and given credit to some other people. Well, people, that's what I've done, and I'm still at it. And if you look around up and down the band, you'll find me running my mouth most any time on any of the frequencies. And I still enjoy my ham radio, and I hope that you'll keep spreading it out. One of the things that we do in Greensboro is to have a school for one of the hams has a class for kids that are interested in it, and he's been pumping out a bunch of young hams up there. Some of them have taken to, and some of them haven't. But opportunities like that, to be sure, we can do what we can. So that one of these days, it'll be a part of the Quarter Century Wireless Association. Thank y'all so much. I'm so glad to be here, and it's good to see all y'all interested in ham radio.
Thanks, Weldon. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to pass to Weldon?
Yeah, I've got a question, Weldon. What rig are you currently using these days?
What am I
What
using
rig?
now?
Yeah, what's your rig?
Well, right now I got a Mark 5 and a 572, and I got a 990 and an L4B.
Yeah, I don't recognize any of those.
They're Yaesu gear.
Oh, yeah.
990.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, both of them are Yaesu. Yeah, the Mark 5 is a Yaesu, and of course they're all solid state. And the amplifiers, of course, are not. They're tube tied. Old L4B, I've had it ever since 1976, and they're still working. Yes,
You mentioned a CW operator in Elizabeth City. Was that Max W4LWZ?
no,
You said LC.
LCV,
LCV,
Yeah.
Oscar Hines.
Oscar Hines. I used to go see him when I was traveling down there nighttime and supper, and he just loved bluefish. So did I.
Well, LWZ was Max.
Right.
He also lived in Max.
The other one lived uptown that I'm thinking of, that I used to go by there, but I can't think of his name. But Oscar's the one I was talking about.
Well, Max was a very good CW operator too.
Yeah,
It's traffic handling.
Yeah.
yeah.
His hands were shaking towards the end, but he could take it at 45 words a minute. But he couldn't send it more than about 15.
Yeah.
So if you sent traffic to Max, you could just turn it on and let it go.
You know, you mentioned that, and now that we don't have to have or know CW to get a ham license. And whenever FCC called that off, I never saw so much activity in all my life as there is on CW now. The activity on CW has picked up in the last year to what it was before that, but I hear guys talking about it. Well, they'd like to know how to operate CW anyhow, and there's a lot of them that are learning how to operate CW. Well, it's just like everything else. You tell somebody they can't have it, they don't need it.
Any other questions? Talking about Mike Everett. Mike Everett is W4DSE.
Yeah, what's his new call?
W4DSE.
DSE?
He's in Raleigh, and he is a member of our chapter. Mike has given a presentation on Fessenden at our radio club several years ago. So we might prevail upon him to come out again. But he's into renovating older equipment such as national receivers and so forth.
Yeah.
That's kind of his thing. Herb?
Yeah, he got his master's degree,
Right.
I think history, and his thesis was.
Was that?
That thesis, that's right.
That's exactly right.
I've got that thesis somewhere in my junk, the whole thing. But he also got this folder up at this nice up. I still got a few more in Greensboro, but if anybody's interested, come by, pass them down through there, and let them take them if they want to, Bob. You're welcome to them.
Okay, thank you very much, Weldon. A few other things. We've had a little discussion with our board members about possibly looking at some other meeting sites for our chapter. We have, for the last couple of years, made a routine location of In December at Lexington, at the Yarborough Steakhouse, which everybody enjoys. March has been here for our easternmost meeting. We then have gone to Denton, North Carolina, which is northwest of Asheboro, up towards Greensboro for June. And September has been in Siler City at the Best Cafeteria. There's been some talk about possibly considering some meeting locations up north of Greensboro and Winston-Salem, possibly up in the Dobson, Mount Airy, Pilot Mountain area. The question to you as a group is, and I'm looking for any input, as are the board members, if anybody who is a member, don't have to be, but would be interested in a ride up in that area for a possible change in pace for a meal and outing such as this. I'm going to ask for a show of hands. I know it's very subjective, but I would like your thoughts. Many of you are regular chapter members, so therefore your weight is a little bit more than others. But do you have any comments, first of all? Silence is definitely. All right. How many, by show of hands, would be interested in a possible meeting up in that neck of the woods for the chapter? Okay, very good. So noted.
I have a question.
Jerry?
What's the distance from, say, Creedmoor?
Well, from here up to Mount Airy was about 140 miles. If you want to talk about Mount Airy, which is quite a ways up near the border. I'm not sure how far it is from there.
35 miles northwest of Winston-Salem,
Okay.
but it's, you got the interstate going through
So
it.
140. Yeah, we have tried to, wherever it is, to be fairly close to a main artery. Obviously, it's easier and easier to follow.
I got an idea.
Go ahead, Weldon.
For all of y'all that like to get out and run around, why go on up there to Mount Airy and get you a sloppy Joe's
Pork chop sandwich.
pork chop sandwich and spend the night and just have a big ball.
It's
of it.
snappy lunch.
Go over there and see the, if you've never seen it, it's amazing to go over there and look at that granite quarry. That is, my grandson, whenever he saw that, he said, that's a big hole. And it's worth going to see, just to go out there and see the granite quarry and eat a pork chop sandwich.
If you bring the family and you got all this Andy Griffith stuff going on. In fact, the pork chop sandwiches at Snappy Lunch was made famous by Andy, but when I was in high school, you could get a hot dog and a drink for a quarter there. Of course, now we're talking about back in the 40s, you know, but
Yeah, well, once in a while, we get in the car and go up there just to have a pork chop sandwich.
yeah.
They're hard to beat. But I'm biased.
All right, thanks for your
Yeah, I'll buy it.
Thanks for your input. Okay, again, we've got a number of visitors here. We want to very much welcome you all. Thanks for coming and joining us. You're welcome to come as a visitor. Obviously, we'd love to have you as a, quote, official member. The website is easy to access, the local website, as is the national website. So one of the easiest ways to find the local website for our chapter is go to the Raleigh Radio Club home page, which is www.rars.org. And go there, and on the right-hand side, about 4 icons down, you'll find QCWA logo. If you click on that, it will take you right to the local chapter website. From there, down at the bottom of our local chapter website is a link to the national. Technically, you go and join national first, and then you join the local chapter. But know that every one of you is very welcome to join us at any time. Okay, see Charlie Swindell, our treasurer, if you'd like to get current with your stuff. Our next meeting is going to be, as mentioned, in Denton, North Carolina. It's about a 90-mile ride from Raleigh. We will meet at 12 o'clock for the officers. Meet and greet is at 12:30. We move it up an hour. As you may know, the the Winston-Salem Hamfest is on the 9th of June. All right, and so we make our Denton meeting 1 hour later so that folks can do the Hamfest for a few hours and then drive down to Denton. It's a pretty straight shot down to Denton. So basically 12 to 3 on June 9th, Saturday. And you're all welcome to come.
We'll celebrate my birthday, it's on June 8th.
June 8th. You remember that. Okay, is there any other further business or announcements for the group? Hank's got Hamfest tickets, if you
Tickets and
want
tables.
any. Go ahead.
Tickets or tables, vote.
Right. Okay, thank you one and all for coming. We certainly appreciate the great turnout, and have a good summer. Thanks.